At 58 years old, I went from performing surgeries in a $4.7 million home to driving Uber in a rusted Honda Civic, all because my father-in-law was the most powerful judge in Connecticut. My name is Dennis Radford. 3 years ago, I was chief of orthopedic surgery at Hartford Medical Center. I had everything a man could want. A beautiful home in West Hartford with 8 bedrooms and a pool house bigger than most people's actual homes, a wine cellar worth more than most people's retirement funds, and a medical practice that brought in $2 million a year. I drove a Mercedes S-Class. My wife Beatrice wore designer clothes and spent her afternoons at the country club playing tennis with the governor's wife. Now, I pick up drunk college students at 2 a.m. for $15 fares, praying they won't vomit in my backseat because I can't afford the $100 cleaning fee Uber charges drivers. You might wonder how a man falls that far, that fast. The answer is simple. Judge Cornelius Blackwood, my father-in-law, the man who controlled half the Connecticut judicial system with his golf course handshakes and backroom deals. When his daughter Beatrice decided she was bored with our marriage and wanted to run off with her 28-year-old personal trainer named Rodney, Judge Blackwood made sure I didn't just lose the divorce. He made sure I lost everything. You were useful for keeping my daughter respectable after her first disaster of a marriage, he told me outside the courthouse the day my medical license was revoked. But she's done with you now, and when a Blackwood is done with someone, they disappear. You'll never practice medicine again. You'll never earn more than minimum wage. I've made sure of that. He was right. Every door in Connecticut slammed shut. Every medical job application was rejected before I could even interview. My colleagues stopped returning my calls. Even my country club membership was revoked for conduct unbecoming of a member, though no one could explain what conduct they meant. But last Tuesday night, an 82-year-old woman got into my car at 11 p.m. outside a mansion in Fairfield. She was wearing pearls and a black wool coat that probably cost more than I make in 6 months. She studied my face in the rearview mirror for a long moment before she spoke. "You're Margaret Pauline Radford's son, aren't you?" Those 8 words changed everything. Because my mother had been dead for 46 years. Or so I'd believed every single day since my father told me she died of cancer when I was 12 years old. The woman in my back seat pulled out a business card with gold-embossed letters. "My name is Constance Drummond. Your mother and I started Pfizer's first real competitor in 1978. She didn't die, Dennis. She's been looking for you your entire life." What she told me next made me pull over on I-95, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold the steering wheel. Because my mother hadn't just been alive all those years. She'd been building an empire worth $47 million, and she'd left every penny of it to me. But that wasn't even the biggest shock of the night. The real surprise was what she'd bought with that money over the years, specifically 15% of Blackwood Industries, my father-in-law's company. She'd been planning something, she'd been waiting, and even though she died 3 years ago, right when my divorce started, she'd left behind everything I needed to destroy the man who destroyed me. Judge Cornelius Blackwood thought he'd erased me. He had no idea he'd just cleared the path for me to discover the truth about who I really was and what my mother had spent 40 years preparing for me to inherit. This is the story of how I lost everything, found out my entire life was built on a lie, and discovered that sometimes revenge is best served by someone who's been planning it before you were even born. Someone who loved you enough to buy shares in your enemy's empire. Someone who knew that one day you'd need more than money, you'd need power, and she'd made sure I'd have both. My name is Dennis Radford. My mother was Margaret Pauline Radford, founder of Drumex Pharmaceuticals. My father was Harold Radford, a paper mill worker who kidnapped me when I was 2 years old, because he couldn't handle his wife being more successful than him. My ex-wife is Beatrice Blackwood, who's about to lose everything she stole from me. And her father, Judge Cornelius Blackwood, is about to learn what happens when you destroy the wrong person's son. This isn't just a story about money or revenge. It's about discovering that the person you've mourned your entire life has been watching over you, protecting you, and preparing for the exact moment when you'd need her most. Even from beyond the grave, my mother was about to teach Judge Blackwood a lesson he'd never forget. You can take everything from a man, but you can't take away his bloodline. And sometimes that bloodline is worth more than you could ever imagine. The night Constance Drummond got into my Uber started like 1,000 other nights. I was parked outside a Dunkin' Donuts, eating a $2 egg sandwich that would be my only meal until breakfast, when the ride request came through. Fairfield Avenue, the wealthy part of town I usually avoided, but it was a $30 fare, and I needed the money. I had no idea I was about to pick up the woman who knew my mother's biggest secret. I had no idea that in 20 minutes, everything I believed about my life would crumble. And I had no idea that my mother, the woman I'd spent 46 years mourning, had spent those same 46 years making sure that when the time came, I'd have everything I needed to rise from the ashes Judge Blackwood had reduced me to. Before Judge Cornelius Blackwood decided to destroy me, I had the kind of life other doctors envied. Every morning, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. in my West Hartford mansion, did laps in our heated pool, and drove my Mercedes S-Class to Hartford Medical Center, where I served as chief of orthopedic surgery. I'd performed over 3,000 successful surgeries. My hands were steadier than a Swiss watchmaker's, and medical students came from Yale just to observe my technique. Dr. Radford's hands are insured for $2 million, my surgical resident used to joke. It wasn't actually a joke. The hospital had insisted on the insurance policy after I'd pioneered a new technique for spinal fusion that reduced recovery time by 60%. Medical journals published my research. I gave keynote speeches at conferences where doctors lined up to shake those insured hands. My wife, Beatrice, seemed perfect for that life. She was beautiful in that carefully maintained way that money provides. Weekly salon appointments, personal trainer sessions every morning, subtle cosmetic procedures that kept her looking 35 when she was actually 48. She served on charity boards and organized hospital fundraisers that raised millions. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. Dennis saved my father's knee after that skiing accident in Aspen. Beatrice would tell anyone who'd listen at dinner parties. Daddy says Dennis has the best hands in New England. Isn't that right, Daddy? Judge Blackwood would nod from across the table, raising his scotch in my direction. This man right here gave me back my golf game. I owe him everything. The truth was more complicated. I'd met Beatrice during my residency 15 years ago. She wasn't a nurse or another doctor like most hospital romances. She was a pharmaceutical rep who strutted through our orthopedic department in designer heels, pulling $1,000 bottles of wine from her briefcase for educational dinners at the most expensive restaurants in Hartford. She pursued me relentlessly. "You're different from the other doctors," she told me after our third dinner. "You're hungry. You want more than just a good salary and a nice car. You want to matter." She was right. I did want to matter. Growing up, I'd watched my father Harold break his back at the paper mill, coming home covered in chemical dust that made him cough through dinner. He'd raised me alone after my mother died, never complained, never remarried, just worked double shifts to pay for my education. "Your mother always dreamed you'd become a doctor," he'd tell me, touching the single photo he kept of her on our mantel. In it, she held baby me, her eyes kind but tired. "Margaret would be so proud of what you've become, son. So proud." That photo lived in my wallet through medical school. I'd pull it out during 18-hour study sessions, during 100-hour residency weeks, during my first solo surgery when my hands shook with nerves. My mother, Margaret Pauline Radford, who died of cancer when I was 12. The woman whose dreams I was living for. Harold walked me down the aisle at my wedding since I had no mother to do it. He looked uncomfortable in his rented tux, surrounded by Beatrice's society friends and Judge Blackwood's political connections. The governor gave a toast. The mayor's wife caught the bouquet. Harold left early, claiming his back hurt from standing too long. "Your father's a good man," Judge Blackwood told me that night, crushing my shoulder with his hand. "Salt of the earth. But you're moving in different circles now, Dennis. You need to think about your image. Maybe limit how often he visits." I should have seen the warning signs. Beatrice slowly pushed Harold out of our lives. First, she was too busy for Sunday dinners. Then she had migraines whenever he called. By the time Harold died of a heart attack 5 years into our marriage, we hadn't seen him in 6 months. I gave the eulogy to a half-empty church. Beatrice stayed home with a stomach bug that mysteriously cleared up in time for her tennis match that afternoon. The marriage worked well enough for 10 years. We were busy being successful. I built my practice. Beatrice decorated our mansion and planned charity galas. We took vacations to Switzerland and Monaco. We had the right friends, belonged to the right clubs, donated to the right causes. If we rarely talked about anything deeper than scheduling conflicts, well, that's what successful marriages looked like, right? Then Beatrice hired Rodney as her personal trainer. 28 years old, muscles like a Greek statue, vocabulary like a 10th grader. She said she needed to get in shape for her high school reunion. She got in shape all right. She also started coming home at midnight, smelling like cologne that wasn't mine, with gym clothes that were mysteriously clean. The night I confronted her, she laughed. "Oh, Dennis, don't be so middle class about it. Everyone has arrangements. Daddy's had 3 mistresses over the years. Mother knows. She has her pottery instructor. That's how civilized people handle these things." But when I filed for divorce, thinking we'd split things evenly and move on, I learned that the Blackwoods had a different definition of civilized. And Judge Cornelius Blackwood was about to teach me that in his world, you don't leave his family. His family leaves you. And when they do, they take everything. The divorce papers arrived at my office on a Tuesday morning while I was between surgeries. Beatrice wasn't just asking for a divorce. She was accusing me of physical abuse, emotional cruelty, and financial misconduct. I actually laughed when I read it, thinking it was some kind of mistake. "She says you've been hiding assets in offshore accounts," my lawyer, Martin Frost, told me that afternoon. "She also claims you've been addicted to gambling and that you've threatened her life multiple times." "Martin, I don't even know how to play poker. I've never raised my voice to Beatrice, let alone my hand. This is insane." Martin nodded, confident at first. "Don't worry. Judges see through these kinds of false accusations all the time. We'll have this sorted out quickly." But Martin didn't know who we were dealing with. 3 days later, he called me at 6 a.m., his voice shaking. "Dennis, I can't represent you anymore. I'm sorry. My wife is pregnant, and I just got a call suggesting it would be unfortunate if something happened during the delivery. I have to withdraw from your case." 3 more lawyers said no after Martin. The 4th one was honest enough to tell me why. "Judge Blackwood owns this state's legal system, Dr. Radford. Any lawyer who takes your case will never practice in Connecticut again. I have 2 kids in college. I can't afford to be a hero." While I scrambled to find representation, the assault began on every front. The medical board received an anonymous complaint that I'd been stealing opioids from the hospital pharmacy. Security footage that would have proven my innocence mysteriously corrupted. A nurse I'd never met testified that she'd seen me filling fake prescriptions. My own surgical resident, the one who used to joke about my insured hands, suddenly remembered seeing me acting erratically during operations. Dr. Harrison Polk, the hospital's chief administrator, called me into his office on a Thursday. We'd been friends for 10 years. Our kids went to the same school. "Dennis, I have to suspend you pending investigation. The board is demanding it. Harry, you know me. You know this is all lies." He couldn't meet my eyes. "Judge Blackwood plays golf with every member of our board. His nephew is our biggest donor. My hands are tied. Clear your office by 5 o'clock. The divorce trial was assigned to Judge Frederick Morton, Blackwood's Yale roommate and golf partner of 30 years. My new lawyer, a public defender named Carol, who was the only one willing to take the case, tried to file for a change of venue. Motion denied. Judge Morton ruled without looking up from his papers. The trial was a masterpiece of orchestrated destruction. Beatrice took the stand in a conservative gray dress, her makeup subtle, tears perfectly timed as she described years of torment that never happened. He would fly into rages over the smallest things, she sobbed. If dinner was 5 minutes late, he'd throw plates. He told me if I ever tried to leave, he'd kill me. I was terrified for my life. Then came the evidence that I knew was fake, but couldn't prove it. Photographs showing me at Foxwoods Casino, receipts for hundreds of thousands in gambling debts, bank statements for accounts I'd never opened showing money being moved to the Cayman Islands. A woman named Destiny testified that I'd been seeing her for 2 years, that I'd promised to leave my wife for her, that I'd given her jewelry and cars. I've never seen this woman before in my life, I told Carol during a recess. It doesn't matter, she whispered back. Look at the jury. They believe her. They believe all of it. Judge Morton's ruling was swift and brutal. The house went to Beatrice for her suffering. My practice was liquidated to pay the fabricated gambling debts. My retirement accounts were seized for hiding assets. The medical board, receiving the divorce trial transcripts, revoked my license for moral turpitude and professional misconduct unbecoming of a physician. After the trial, Judge Blackwood found me in the parking garage. He was smoking a Cuban cigar, surrounded by 2 of his state trooper bodyguards. You know, Dennis, I actually liked you at first. You were useful. Beatrice needed respectability after her first disaster of a divorce, and you provided that. But she's bored now. She wants her trainer boy, and what my daughter wants, she gets. You destroyed my entire life over your daughter's affair? He laughed, blowing smoke in my face. I destroyed you because you thought you could leave her. Nobody leaves the Blackwood family. We do the leaving. Consider this a lesson in how the real world works. Your medical degree, your surgical skills, that middle-class pride of yours, none of it matters when you're up against real power. He dropped his cigar and crushed it under his handmade Italian shoe. You'll never work in medicine again. Every hospital in New England knows your name now. Every medical practice has your photo on their do not hire list. I've made some calls. You're finished. He turned to leave, then looked back. Oh, and Dennis, that studio apartment you rented in the East Side? Your landlord just got a call about your criminal record. You have 3 days to move out. Better start looking for something more appropriate for your new station in life. Maybe under a bridge? The bodyguards laughed as they walked away, leaving me standing alone in the empty parking garage, holding a cardboard box with the contents of my office, my insured hands now worth nothing. My mother's photo still in my wallet, the only thing they couldn't take from me. The eviction notice was taped to my door when I got home from the trial. 3 days to vacate. I spent the first day calling every contact I had in medicine, burning through my phone battery, leaving voicemails that would never be returned. Dr. Peterson, who I'd trained, answered once by mistake. Dennis, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. If Blackwood finds out I even took this call, he'll end my career too. Please don't call again. The line went dead. That was when I finally understood the completeness of my destruction. It wasn't just my career or my money. Judge Blackwood had made me radioactive. Anyone who helped me would suffer the same fate. I moved into a pay-by-the-week motel in East Hartford, where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor's TV and his coughing fits that lasted all night. The room smelled like cigarettes and mold. The sheets had stains I didn't want to identify, but it was all I could afford with the few $1,000s I'd hidden in my father's old toolbox, money Beatrice's lawyers hadn't found, because they didn't think to look in something so working class. For 6 months, I applied for any job that might take me. Pharmacy technician positions, medical equipment sales, hospital administration, even medical billing. Every application ended the same way. They'd Google my name, find the headlines, "Prominent surgeon loses license in scandal," and "Doctors gambling and abuse exposed in divorce," and suddenly the position would be filled. I tried applying under variations of my name: Dennis P. Radford, D.P. Radford, even just Dennis. But the background checks always caught up. One hiring manager at CVS actually felt sorry enough to tell me the truth. "Someone called our corporate office," she said quietly. "They said if we hired you, our pharmacy would start failing DEA inspections. I have a family to feed. I'm sorry." Pride is a luxury when you're hungry. After my cash ran out, I swallowed what was left of my dignity and applied to drive for Uber. They didn't care about medical licenses or newspaper scandals. They just needed someone with a car and a clean driving record. I still had my mother's old Honda Civic that I'd kept in storage all these years, a 1998 model with 200,000 miles that my father had bought used when I was in high school. Beatrice had always hated that I kept it. "Why do you hold on to that piece of junk?" she'd asked once. "Because it reminds me where I came from," I'd told her. Now, it was all I had left, and it was taking me right back to where I started. My first night driving was a disaster. I didn't know the shortcuts. I got lost twice. A drunk passenger vomited in the back seat, and the cleaning cost me more than I'd made all night. But I kept going. What else was I going to do, starve? I developed a routine to survive. Drive from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. when the rates were highest. Sleep until noon. Eat one meal a day at the Pakistani restaurant, where the owner, who didn't know who I used to be, gave me extra rice for free. Avoid anywhere I might see someone from my old life. But Hartford isn't that big. One night I picked up Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the hospital. She'd been a resident under me 5 years ago. She got in the car, looked at her phone, then froze when she recognized my voice giving her the standard Uber greeting. "Dr. Radford. Dennis, oh my God." "Hello, Jennifer." She was quiet for the entire 15-minute ride. When we arrived at her apartment, she got out without a word, but she left a $100 tip on the app. The note said, "I'm sorry. We all know it wasn't true. That $100 bought me groceries for 2 weeks. I wanted to be proud, to refuse pity money, but pride doesn't fill your stomach or pay for gas. For 2 years, this was my life. Pick up strangers, drive them places, collect $300 to $400 a week, pay for my motel room, gas and ramen noodles, sleep, repeat." I stopped looking in mirrors. I stopped thinking about the future. I existed, nothing more. Then, on that Tuesday night in November, my phone pinged with a ride request from Fairfield Avenue, the wealthy part of town. My finger hovered over the decline button. The last thing I needed was to pick up someone who might recognize me, who might remember Dr. Dennis Radford from the country club or the charity galas. But it was a $40 fare. That was 2 days of food. I accepted. The house was a brick mansion with columns, the kind Beatrice would have loved. An elderly woman was waiting outside, wearing a black wool coat and pearls that caught the streetlight. She moved carefully but deliberately, like someone who'd never rushed for anything because the world waited for her. She climbed into the back seat with surprising grace for her age. I gave my standard greeting, confirming her destination was the Fairfield train station. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied my face in the rearview mirror with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Driver," she finally said, her voice carrying an accent I couldn't place, maybe mid-Atlantic, the kind wealthy people used to cultivate. "What's your name?" "Dennis," I said, not wanting to give my full name, a habit I'd developed to avoid recognition. "Dennis what?" I hesitated. "Just Dennis." She leaned forward slightly. "Dennis Radford. You're Dennis Radford, aren't you? You're Margaret Pauline Radford's son." The words hit me like ice water. No one had said my mother's full name in decades, My father had always just called her Margaret. Her maiden name, Pauline, was barely mentioned. How did this stranger know it? My mother died when I was 12, I said carefully, my hands tightening on the wheel. The woman laughed, but it wasn't cruel. It was knowing, almost sad. Oh, Dennis, your mother is very much alive, and I've been looking for you for 3 years. My hands started shaking so badly I had to pull into the nearest parking lot, a closed Walgreens with one flickering streetlight. The woman in my back seat remained calm, reaching into her designer handbag to pull out a leather folder. My name is Constance Drummond, she said, passing me a business card with gold embossed letters. I was your mother's business partner and best friend for 42 years. Dennis, everything you've believed about your life is a lie. My mother died of cancer in 1979. My father told me she was sick for months. He showed me the death certificate. Your father showed you a forgery. Look at this. She handed me a photograph, and my world tilted. It was my mother, unmistakably her, the same eyes from the photo in my wallet, but older, standing in front of a massive glass building. The sign behind her read Drumex Pharmaceuticals. She wore a CEO's power suit, her hair silver, her smile confident. The date stamp on the photo said 2018. That's impossible. That woman just looks like her. My mother was a housewife. She died when I was 12. Constance pulled out more photos. My mother, through the years, aging naturally, running a company, shaking hands with senators, ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. In one photo from 2015, she stood at what was clearly a medical conference. The banner behind her read, Drumex Pharmaceuticals announces breakthrough in cholesterol management. Your mother was never a housewife, Dennis. She was a biochemist with a PhD from MIT. She and I started Drumex Pharmaceuticals in 1978 with a $10,000 loan and 3 patents she'd developed. By 1979, we had our first $1 million contract. That's when your father snapped. My throat felt like sandpaper. What are you talking about? Harold was a good man, Dennis, but he was also a man of his time. He couldn't handle his wife earning 10 times his salary. He couldn't handle her traveling to conferences, managing male employees, being written about in Time magazine as one of the women revolutionizing medicine. So one night in March 1979, while Margaret was at a conference in Chicago, Harold packed you up and disappeared. She pulled out a newspaper clipping from the Boston Globe, dated April 1979. The headline read, Pharmaceutical executive's son kidnapped by father in custody dispute. He took you and ran. Changed your last name from Paulson to Radford, his mother's maiden name. Moved from Boston to Hartford. Told everyone his wife died. Told you she died. And Harold was smart about it. He moved just far enough to avoid easy detection, but not so far that it would raise suspicions. He worked factory jobs that paid in cash. He kept you out of school for a year, then enrolled you with your new name and forged documents. I stared at the clipping, at my mother's desperate face in the photo, at the quote where she begged for her son's return. She looked for me. She never stopped looking. Private investigators, FBI connections, everything. But this was before the internet, before digital records. Harold knew how to stay hidden. He was careful. Paranoid even. Never used credit cards, never took jobs that required extensive background checks, moved apartments every few years. Constance pulled out another document. This is from the private investigator she hired in 2005. He finally tracked you down through your medical school graduation announcement. She was planning to contact you, but then she learned about your marriage to Beatrice Blackwood. She knew about Beatrice. She knew everything. She had people watching you from a distance for years. She knew about your practice, your success, your marriage. She also knew exactly who Judge Cornelius Blackwood was. That's why she started buying shares in his company through shell corporations. 15% over 20 years, piece by piece, never enough at once to trigger SEC notifications. Why didn't she just call me, write to me, show up at my door? Constance's expression softened. Because she saw you'd built a life. You were successful, married, respected. How do you walk up to someone and destroy everything they believe about their childhood? She kept waiting for the right moment. Then your divorce started. She pulled out a legal document. This is dated 1 week before she died. She'd compiled evidence of Judge Blackwood's corruption going back 20 years. Bribes, tax evasion, case fixing, all of it. She was going to expose him, destroy him, then reveal herself to you. But the stroke took her first. When did she die? 3 years ago, March 15th. The same week your divorce papers were filed. The stress of seeing what Blackwood was doing to you, knowing she had all this power to stop it but wanting to do it right, it was too much. She died holding your medical school graduation photo. Tears. I didn't know I could still cry burned my eyes. She was alive all those years. She was right there in Boston, 2 hours away. She left you everything, Dennis. $47 million, her entire estate. But more importantly, she left you the weapon to destroy the man who destroyed you. That 15% of Blackwood Industries? Combined with 3 other shareholders she'd secretly aligned, you now control 41% of his company. You have the votes to remove him from his own board. She handed me another business card. Whitman and Associates, her estate lawyers, they've been searching for you for 3 years, but after your name was dragged through the mud in the divorce, you became invisible in the system. No credit cards, no permanent address, no digital footprint, just like your father when he took you. That's why you've been looking for me. I promised Margaret I'd find you. It took 3 years, but private investigators finally tracked you down through your Uber registration. Tonight wasn't random, Dennis. I've been requesting rides from this area for 2 weeks, hoping to get you as my driver. I looked at the photos again. My mother's life without me. Successful beyond imagination, but alone. Did she remarry, have other children? Never. You were her only child. She used to say that everything she built was just waiting for you to claim it. The companies, the money, the evidence against Blackwood, all of it was for the day she could hand it to you and say, "This is your real inheritance. Not just wealth, but justice." 6 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse in Hartford, but this time I wasn't the defendant. Judge Cornelius Blackwood sat at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide the electronic monitoring bracelet on his ankle. The FBI had arrested him at his country club right in the middle of his weekly golf game with the governor. The image made the front page of every newspaper in Connecticut. The evidence my mother had compiled was devastating and meticulous. 23 years of documented bribes, fraudulent case dismissals, tax evasion through shell companies, and racketeering that reached into every corner of Connecticut's judicial system. She'd kept recordings, bank transfers, even videos of Blackwood accepting envelopes of cash in his study. The FBI director later told me it was the most comprehensive corruption case they'd ever prosecuted. The defendant is sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, the judge announced. Blackwood's shoulders sagged. Behind him, Beatrice sobbed, but they weren't the practiced tears from our divorce. These were real. She'd lost everything when the assets were frozen. The mansion, the cars, the jewelry, all of it was